Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to the Talking News on Saturday, the 19th of February 2022. Well, we didn't all blow away, but my goodness, the weather has been very extreme this week. I'm now speaking to you from Spain. I have managed to get away for a few days, although I have to say the flight was extremely hairy this morning, and I'm not entirely convinced that the plane should have taken off. But this aside, being that it's half term, I am taking a couple of days off, but I will be back middle of the week. Before I left, we were all very busy preparing the February newsletter, which is currently with the printers and due to come out at the end of the month. This newsletter has several articles which we hope are of interest, including the usual Meet the Volunteer, Meet the Trustee, Meet the Member, but also information on the new Moorfields iApp, information on restarting our member forum group, information on restarting our local fundraising committee, and an article on travelling around and on and off the island. The article describes the discounts, services and help that's available with Red Funnel, Whitelink, Hover Travel and Southern Vectors. It also talks about how to apply for a blue badge and who is automatically entitled to them, and further what to do if you're not automatically entitled to them. There are lots of discount cards and schemes available, so we have tried to simplify it for people. I very much hope that this newsletter finds everybody well, and I will speak to you next week. Thank you, Lisa.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined £7 million worth of government funding towards 4 major Isle of Wight coastal defence projects. 4 major coastal defence projects on the Isle of Wight are one step closer to completion after receiving £7 million of central government funding. The Environment Agency, in partnership with Isle of Wight Council, is working alongside industry experts to reduce the risk of flooding and coastal erosion to more than 3,700 island homes and businesses, vital infrastructure, and over 300 hectares of protected habitat. The scheme will see 4 projects at Embankment Road in Bemridge, Yaverland, Shanklin and Ventnor being progressed thanks to the crucial government funding. The current coastal defences are ageing at these locations, and the current work is investigating how these could be replaced. The programme includes seeking the necessary funds for refurbishment and replacement of some of the existing coastal defences and additional slope stabilisation measures in Ventnor, refurbishment of the seawall and defences at Yaverland and Culver Parade in Sandown, refurbishment of the seawall and defences at Shanklin Esplanade, and repair work to the sea defences at Embankment Road between St Helens and Bembridge. Although the Ventnor and Shanklin defences are owned and maintained by the Isle of Wight Council, the Environment Agency is working on the Council's behalf to develop a business case for future investment. The defences at Embankment Road are privately owned and maintained, but as a competent authority under habitat regulations, the Environment Agency is looking to protect the designated habitat of breeding marshes. Different parts of the Yaverland defences are owned and maintained by either the Environment Agency or Isle of Wight Council, but both organisations will work together to assess how best to refurbish or replace parts of the coastal defences, which were first built by Victorian engineers over 100 years ago. Floods Minister Rebecca Pow has said, "This vital £7 million in funding will bring the Isle of Wight Coastal Defence Scheme one step closer to beginning construction, and once completed, will see more than 3,700 island homes and businesses better protected from flooding and coastal erosion. This funding is just one part of our record £5.2 billion investment to better protect hundreds of thousands of properties across England." Nick Gray, the Environment Agency's Flood and Coastal Risk Manager for Solent and South Downs area, said, "It's great news that we can now move to the next stage of this ambitious scheme. Our teams will continue our work with the community to understand their priorities and concerns and develop and design a preferred option for each location. It will also enable us to undertake the necessary technical, economic and environmental work and ground investigations to inform our decisions. Once this phase is complete, we will be requesting further funding from central government to finalise the business case and construct the schemes. At this stage, it is estimated that the 4 capital schemes have a total potential cost of £54.7 million, with partnership funding opportunities to supplement the available government funding. Councillor Jonathan Bacon, the Isle of Wight Council Cabinet Member responsible for the environment, adds, "Flooding and coastal erosion can have a devastating and lasting impact on the lives of those affected, and this is why it remains a high priority for us and why we have agreed a significant investment in the programme. We are determined to support people who are most at risk as much as we can. These long-term commitments in partnership with the Environment Agency and significant government funding will make homes, businesses and infrastructure more resilient to the accelerating impacts of the climate crisis. The views of the public are important to us as we continue to plan this important work, and we will continue to consult them."
This is Alison, reading an article from On the Wight, entitled "Councillor to be locked in a cage for 5 hours without speaking." Councillor Andre has agreed to the challenge to raise awareness of the plight of monkeys and lemurs being kept as pets in often horrendous conditions. The Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary are delighted to announce that on Saturday the 19th of February they will be locking Councillor Debbie Andre in a cage in the foyer of Morrison's supermarket in Lake. Councillor Andre is the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Education and Lifelong Skills, and Ward Member for Sandown North. She will spend 5 hours in a small cage between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Saturday, during which time she will not be permitted to speak. Whilst many people will find amusement in Councillor Andre's incarceration, and even question whether such a long period of quietude is even plausible, there is a very serious message behind Saturday's activity. Councillor Andre has kindly agreed to participate in this very public ordeal to support the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary and raise awareness of the plight of monkeys and lemurs being kept as pets in often horrendous conditions. Currently, it is perfectly within the law to keep animals such as monkeys and lemurs as pets without regulation, which has seen primates kept in bird cages, in front rooms and garden sheds. The Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary is currently building a new world-class primate rescue facility that we hope will eventually become home to many primates who will be rescued from such horrendous conditions when the government introduces the Kept Animals Bill. Councillor Andre has kindly agreed to support us by donating her time and commitment to this cause. Whilst we hope that her endeavours on Saturday morning will convey a very serious message, we also know that her time at Morrison's will be eventful. What will Councillor Andre be wearing? Is it even possible for her to keep silent for 5 hours? Can she escape from the clutches of dastardly team from the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary? The Wild Heart Trust would like to thank Councillor Andre for both her time and passionate enthusiasm for the cause, as well as Morrison's Supermarket for agreeing to host our outlandish escapades.
This is an article from On the Wight, read by Terry. Calls for Town Council to buy messy empty plot and turn into a park. A working party has now been set up by Cowes Town Council, which has written to the landowner asking for a tidy-up. Foxes, fire hazard and shabby land fears have seen residents call for an island developer to do something with an empty site in the centre of Cowes. The privately owned land on Market Hill is a green spot, but neighbours in nearby Castle Road have raised concerns, saying it has become increasingly untidy. The residents have now approached Cowes Town Council, CTC, asking the authority to buy the land from the developer, something it considered in 2019, and want it turned into a small park. A working party has now been set up by CTC, which has written to the landowner asking for a tidy-up. It also wants the Isle of Wight Council to investigate. Mavis Patterson, whose garden backs onto the land, says abandoned rubble and a lack of upkeep has attracted foxes and vermin, although environmental health inspectors found no evidence of it. Miss Patterson has also raised concerns about the safety of the retaining walls that separate the land close to Cowes High Street. In 2013, planning permission was granted for a pair of semi-detached houses, but it has since lapsed. 10 years ago, the untidy nature of the site was also flagged by the government's planning inspectorate during a planning appeal. Cowes North councillor Richard Quigley said Cowes residents are lucky because the town is well kept with the sea on their doorstep. He said it meant land left in a shabby state becomes very noticeable. Councillor Quigley said, "It appears the landowner does not want to engage, so residents are taking the only option left and campaigning to get the site into an acceptable condition." Attempts to contact the landowner have been made, but no response has been received at the time of publication.
This is Lisa reading from Isle of Wight Radio. More details revealed for Tour of Britain's Isle of Wight visit. More hints at the route of September's highly anticipated Isle of Wight stage of the Tour of Britain have been revealed. The Isle of Wight will host the final stage of this cycling event on September the 11th and recently announced it will start in Ryde. Other details of the final route have yet to be announced for the event that will be televised across the world. All eyes of the world will be on the island, said Councillor Julie Jones-Evans. Speaking at the Newport and Carisbrooke County Council meeting on Monday, member Councillor Jones-Evans, also the Isle of Wight Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Business Development and Tourism, said the route will come through the centre of Newport. She had originally said the event was only going to visit the island's county town by using the dual carriageway, which she thought was not good enough. However, she said she has got organisers to change their mind. The route, Councillor Jones-Evans says, will see the cyclists start in Ryde, then go through Sandown and Newport before finishing at the top of Tennyson Down. While members of the Community Council were excited about the race, further questions about the route's specifics were raised, including the potential to go up Carisbrooke Castle. Councillor Jeff Brodie, chair of the Community Council and keen watcher of the cycle races, said the worst thing in a professional cycling race was a flat stage, as the athletes would go past quickly. Councillor Brooks said the more hills the organisers built into the route, the better, and questioned whether the race was going to pass through the town only once, as the stages was usually around 100 miles long. Councillor Jones-Evans said she had no more details for the final route until it was announced in early March. Councillor Jones-Evans suggested a sustainable event could be held on the day for the community, as other hosts had done.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined, Mathers pleads guilty to driving offences after Sandown crash. 44-year-old Charlotte Mathers has pleaded guilty to driving without due care and attention and 2 other motoring offences following an earlier's crash in Sandown back in December of last year. It was just after 5 a.m. on 4th of December that police were called to Albert Road in Sandown when a Volkswagen Beetle, owned and registered to Mathers, ploughed into a number of parked vehicles, causing extensive damage, the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court heard on Tuesday. By the time officers arrived, the driver and passenger of the vehicle had already fled the scene, leaving behind destruction to 5 vehicles and the Volkswagen abandoned in the middle of the road, as previously reported by Island Echo. A Subaru Impreza sustained £3,000 worth of damage, whilst a Mini 1 was completely written off. Anne Smout, prosecuting, told the court that Mathers failed to report the accident within 24 hours, but later came forward to police, stating that she was fleeing someone who had been chasing her. Mrs. Smout said that in voluntary interview, Mathers stated she believed an ex-partner was following through Shanklin Lake and into Sandown. After the crash, she then fled the scene as she feared the vehicle was going to turn up, but it didn't. Mathers and her new boyfriend went to a nearby hotel to seek a room, and despite having mobile phones, made no effort to report the matter to police, the court heard. The 44-year-old of Terrace Road in Newport pleaded guilty to failing to stop after a road accident, failing to report an accident, and driving without due care and attention. Magistrates decided to send the case to the Isle of Wight Crown Court for sentencing, as Mathers is in breach of a 4-month prison sentence, suspended for 24 months, that was issued by the Crown Court in February 2021 for the offence of being in charge of a dog dangerously out of control. The case will be heard on the 9th of March, with Charlotte Mathers given unconditional bail until that date.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled Work to Improve Pavement Access Underway Across the Island. Work by the Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads to make pavements more accessible to all pedestrians is being ramped up once more. In the coming weeks, Island Roads will be installing tactile dropped curb crossing points at 16 locations across the island. On completion of the programme, Island Roads will then look to install at least another 10 crossing points as part of its Highways PFI work to upgrade footways in this coming year. This year's work is in addition to more than 70 new crossing points delivered recently, both through the PFI programme and using additional money prioritised by the Council to fund accessibility schemes. Stephen Ashman, Island Roads Service Director, said, "We remain in ongoing dialogue with local groups that champion the need for footways that are accessible for all, and we are delighted to once again be working with the Council on schemes that make a real difference to people." Councillor Phil Jordan, Isle of Wight Council Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, said, "These tactile crossing points are used by many pedestrian groups, including those with prams or those who have visual impairment or mobility issues. I welcome this investment in making sure our pavements are suitable and safe for all those who use them." Jan Brooks, CEO of Isle Access, said, "We are really pleased to see the Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads continuing their commitment to improving access for many people on the island. The dropped curbs will make it easier for people to get around their communities and are a factor in preventing loneliness and isolation." The sites in line for the next tranche of dropped curb crossing points are Bannock Road Whitwell near Kemming Road, Melville Street Sandown near Broadway, Cornwall Road Ventnor near Newport Road, Nicholson Street Newport, junction with Horsebridge Hill, Milligan Road Ryde near West Street, West Street Ventnor near High Street, Winchester Park Road Sandown near Broadway, both eastern and western sides, Royal Crescent Sandown near Beachfield Road and near Melville Street, Three Gates Road Cows near Place Road.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Council make U-turn on weed killing as streets become overrun. The Isle of Wight Council has made a U-turn on the use of chemical weed killers across the Isle of Wight as the number of complaints about the state of the island's streets soars. It was in March of last year that Island Roads announced it would be ending the decades-old method of using quad bikes to spray chemical weed killers. Instead, the Highways PFI contractor said it would employ extra staff and use non-glyphosate herbicides and manual tools to get rid of the weeds. Now, less than a year later, it has been decided that the plan has failed, with local residents submitting hundreds of complaints about the state of their roads. As a result, glyphosate will again be used to keep the streets free of weeds. It was only in July last year that Island Roads stated that public feedback on changes to weeding across the Isle of Wight had been very positive. But with over 200 complaints submitted in July and August alone, it seems the idea was stronger than the reality. Basic math calculations showed that it was impossible for manual workers to cover the same distance as a sprayer mounted to a quad bike, with the work taking longer to achieve too. The use of proper weed killers that have proven effective for years will return this spring. In a statement, a spokesman for Island Roads has said, "Regrettably, we are unable to meet our contractual requirements to control weeds on the network using manual labour and organic herbicides. Therefore, following discussions with the Isle of Wight Council, our intention is to resume the use of licensed glyphosate-based herbicides like those used in household weed killers this spring."
This is Lisa reading from Isle of Wight Radio. Islanders encouraged to go green with garden waste. Spring will soon be on its way and Islanders are being encouraged to join the gardening gang by booking a council service. Subscriptions are now open for green-fingered gardeners who want to join the service for the 2022-23 period. Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Lead for the Environment, Waste and Heritage, said fortnightly garden waste collection continues to be popular, with an increase from 7,000 subscribers over 2019-2020 to 10,450 in the current 2020-2021 period. Subscriptions can be made up until the 18th of March, but are limited, so please do not delay and sign up today. Let us make your gardening life easier by subscribing for our garden waste collection service this year. Picked up from your doorstep, it takes the hassle out of driving to the tip and putting heavy, wet garden waste in your car boot. The optional fortnight scheme lets customers subscribe online for a 240-litre wheeled bin or 3 reusable Hessian sacks to be picked up from the curbside for a total cost of £96 per year, working out at £4 a fortnight. Strategic Manager of Contracts, Waste and Environment, Natasha Dix, said, "Our garden waste scheme has always been popular and we are encouraging new gardeners to subscribe and reserve your space for 2022. All garden waste is collected, is composted locally here on the island and contributes to our national recycling targets. Don't forget you can always sign up and share the cost and load with your neighbour. Alternatively, composting at home is also a low carbon option that is great for your own veg patch. The council will accept all garden waste such as leaves, grass cuttings and sticks. Please no logs, rubble or soil. Also, your garden waste subscription will include a free Christmas tree collection. Your garden waste service is a one-stop shop, meaning you do not have to call for collection each time. To sign up, in order to book the service, you will need an account at iwight.com. If you do not have an account, please create one first and then go to www.iwight.com/green garden waste and fill in the details. You will need to pay for the service when you order it, and then it will be collected on your normal recycling week, although it may be on a different day. If you do not have an email address, you can call the contact centre on Isle of Wight 823 777, that is 823 777, with your credit or debit card ready. The subscription will run from the 1st of April to the 31st of March next year. If you're signing up for the first time, your bin/sacks will be delivered within 14 days, with the annual service beginning on the 1st of April. Councillor Bacon added, "The last year or so has seen our gardens provide a haven of peace and tranquility during very uncertain times, and we really have come to appreciate our own green spaces. The service is competitive with other services on the island and is great for gardeners and garden maintenance people and brings a number of benefits. It is a great time saver with less trips to the tip and saves on our individual carbon footprint, giving you more time to focus on your garden. Existing subscribers whose contract period is due to end will have been contacted or emailed directly during January about their current subscription, with details on how to renew for 2022. Please check your junk folder if you've not received the email.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined Annual Maintenance. Red Funnel has announced its regular annual servicing schedule for 2022 to ensure its vessels are fully equipped for the forecasted busy summer months. Red Osprey started her refit programme in the early stages of January and will be in maintenance through to mid-February. Red Eagle is due to start her annual maintenance in mid-February until the end of March. Later in April and May, Red Eagle will be out of service to change its Wight unit propeller, which is due to take place in Southampton. Red Falcon is due to undergo her annual refit in November until mid-December, and Red Kestrel, the commercial vessel, is due to start her refit in December until the beginning of January 2023. Throughout all annual refits, Red Funnel will be working hard to maintain its usual services and timetables to ensure customers experience minimal disruption. As part of the annual works, Red Funnel will also be completing renovations of its onboard lifts to enable a more pleasant and accessible journey for customers, replacing all elevator doors on A, B, C and D deck of Red Falcon, Red Osprey and Red Eagle. Other works will include hull cleaning, tank inspections, chipping, priming and painting the external decks, as well as undertaking hull and machinery surveys. Leanna Lakes, the Operations Director at Red Funnel, has said, "Every year we invest heavily into regular maintenance and improvements to our vessels, with the aim to provide customers with a reliable and safe service. To help align our vessels with the ever-changing weather and service conditions, each of our vessels now undergo a full annual service, ensuring we are ready to welcome passengers during the busy months ahead."
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled "Vehicle Donated by Southern Vectis Arrives in Zambia After Mammoth Journey." A Southern Vectis vehicle donated to help provide vital driving training and mechanical maintenance skills to people in Zambia has arrived safely in its adopted country. The Go Ahead Group-owned Isle of Wight bus operator gave the coach to the Industrial Training Centre, ITC, in Lusaka as part of its partnership with transport charity Transaid. Transaid works with partners and governments to solve transport challenges in economically developing countries across the world. In doing so, it enriches lives, ensuring the futures of generations to come by providing support and training to professional drivers. Andrew Wickham, Managing Director of Southern Vectis, says, "Our partner charity, Transaid, backs the ITC by donating skills, funding and equipment to help the centre deliver its curriculum. The ITC is a Zambian government-backed vocational college, providing training on all forms of road transport, but principally lorries, buses and coaches. We know that coaches are a vital mode of transport in Zambia because they link very isolated communities via an extensive network of routes. Sadly, road traffic accidents are relatively common, and it is important to put that right by helping to improve infrastructure and education. I'm pleased Southern Vectis has been able to play a part in this by donating a vehicle to be used in training. The Southern Vectis coach has replaced a 30-year-old obsolete one and will be put to good use as a training tool. It was joined in Lusaka recently by another donated vehicle, and both were unveiled at an official launch earlier this month. Caroline Barber, Chief Executive of Transaid, said, We are incredibly grateful to the Go Ahead Group for its generous donation to our partner organisation in Zambia. The vehicle will even further enhance standards of training at the ITC and make a significant impact on the ground. Lloyd Mabasela, ITC Director, added, "We are delighted to have received the vehicle. The coach is in excellent condition and a delight to see. Our driving instructors, the rest of the ITC staff and students look forward to achieving the very best with it. Thank you all for your effort and contributions towards this achievement."
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Work to begin on new football ground at Whippingham later this week. Preliminary work at the site of the new Newport Football Club ground at the racecourse is to begin this week, with an aim of having the new ground completed by the autumn. The main part of the works will be the creation of a visibility splay from the proposed access to the racecourse by cutting back the hedgerow. New hedgerow planting will be undertaken to compensate for this, and the works are being supervised by an ecological consultant with the approval of the Isle of Wight Council. Newport Football Club Chairman Peter Westhorpe said, "There are one or two issues that need to be agreed with the Isle of Wight Council before the main work on the new stadium can begin, but I know supporters will be encouraged to see this preliminary work get underway." The club is currently ground sharing with Ryde Saints at Smallbrook, while the new stadium is constructed. Part of that ground share agreement requires new floodlights at Smallbrook to be provided. Peter added, "I am pleased to say that we are moving forward on this issue too, and I expect there to be some tangible developments in the very near future." If remaining issues with the council are overcome, the hope is that work can commence on the new racecourse stadium, including an all-weather pitch, clubhouse and ample parking, in May and be completed in the autumn.
This is Lisa reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Sex offender arrested after absconding from HMP North Sea Camp Prison. A dangerous, on-the-run sex offender has been arrested in Skegness by police following a public appeal. Paul Robson, who is serving a life sentence for attempted rape and indecent assault, was reported missing from HMP North Sea Camp in Boston, Lincolnshire on Sunday. East Area Commander Chief Superintendent Kate Anderson said, "We are pleased to report that we have arrested Paul Robson. We are grateful to members of the public for their help and support in sharing our appeals, and we'd also like to give thanks to everybody who has called in with potential sightings of him. We'd also like to extend our thanks to partner agencies and our officers for working tirelessly to apprehend Robson." Police issued a detailed description of the 56-year-old man and had urged anyone with information on his whereabouts to call 999. Newcastle-born Robson was jailed for life in 2000 after he crawled into a woman's home through her cat flap and attacked her while holding a knife to her throat. He put a pillowcase over her head during the vicious assault. He was described by the judge as a menace to females, having been put in and out of prison on attacks against women and girls as young as 8 before he was given his life sentence.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined "Fairley Road Petrol Station to close, but service station remains." Fairley Road Petrol Station in Newport is to close. The current owners have decided that after 60 years of selling fuel, the time has come to shut off the pumps. The site will be turned into a larger area for car sales and service repairs. The fuel pumps and shop are expected to close in March. Posting on Facebook, owner Simon Flack said, "Having sold petrol for 60 years, I have decided it is time for our family business to move with the times, and I'll be closing the fuel pumps along with the shop in March. Having lived in Fairley Road for 60 years, it is understandable that we feel part of the community, but unfortunately, the time for us to sell fuel has passed. We are pleased to announce that the car sales will be expanding, and the workshop will continue to operate as usual. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing us and putting your trust in our services. Our slogan of so much more than just petrol has served us well. Although you will no longer see this in our advertising, in essence this remains true. Just think of us now as fairly so much more, just not petrol. As we transition, we will keep our customers updated through various channels.
This is an article from On the Wight, read by Lisa. Longest staying resident at the RSPCA Isle of Wight Rehoming Centre finds love on Valentine's Day. Ojo spent a total of 325 days in the animal's charity care, receiving behavioural therapy from the charity's specialist team. The longest staying resident at the RSPCA Isle of Wight Rehoming Centre has left to start a new life in a loving home from Valentine's Day this year. Ojo was brought to the UK from Thailand when he was just a puppy, and he didn't adjust well to his new life in suburbia. At 18 months of age, he ended up in the RSPCA Isle of Wight's care when his previous owner was no longer able to manage his additional behavioural needs. In March 21, the charity had started the long journey to provide the support and treatment he needed to build confidence with humans and other animals and a range of everyday experience which other dogs take in their stride. He spent a total of 325 days in the animal charity's care, receiving behavioural therapy from their specialist team. Susan Pugh, RSPCA Isle of Wight branch manager, said, "We are so pleased that the right home has been found for Ojo. I am so proud of our animal care staff who have gently nurtured Ojo's emotional health and given him the confidence to enjoy life once more." Ojo's journey has been a long and challenging one, with intensive support and medical care required to introduce him to everyday situations, sounds, smells and vehicles. Everything was very scary for him. Over time, Ojo was even buddied up with a canine therapy dog to help him learn new skills from a confident canine companion. This kind of work is only made possible thanks to the generosity of our donors and the volunteers who give up their time to help at the centre or in our shops, helping raise the vital funds. We wish Ojo all the very best in his new home. To find out more about the RSPCA Isle of Wight, or to make a donation or adopt an animal, please visit their website.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Beer and Buses weekend permanently cancelled, announce organisers. Time has been called on the popular Isle of Wight classic Buses, Beer and Walks weekend, with organisers confirming the annual event will not be making a return. The event, a collaboration between the Isle of Wight Bus Museum and Isle of Wight Camera, that's a campaign for real ale, had grown from an initial attendance of 3,000 visitors and 40 buses to 20,000 visitors and 105 buses by the 2019 event. Visitors travelled from all over the UK, as well as international visitors, which included a vintage bus driven across from Belgium. It was estimated to contribute up to £500,000 each year to the island economy. The COVID-19 pandemic prevented the 2020 and 2021 events from taking place, but equally gave the organisers an opportunity to reflect on the stress and strains of previous events. Tim Marshall of Isle of Wight Camera has said, "The decision to call time on the event was not an easy one to make. The event was organised by a small group of volunteers with specialist backgrounds who gave their time at no cost. However, with planning taking 9 months to complete, this would be unsustainable in the long term. Also, the loss of some key members from the organising team, including the sad passing of Isle of Wight Bus Museum Chairman Bill Ackroyd during 2021, had been contributing factors, alongside many restrictions that would be necessary to implement even in a post-COVID world. Although the Beer and Buses weekend won't be returning, a smaller event will be held in the Ryde area. Ben Bartram from the Isle of Wight Bus Museum explains. Although the event will no longer be held in the same way, true enthusiasts of beer and classic buses are promised to still be well catered for. The Isle of Wight Bus Museum will hold major weekend events on 14th and 15th of May and 8th and 9th of October 2022, when we hope to attract a reasonable number of visiting classic buses to the island, operating services in the Ryde area and beyond. It is hoped that visitors and locals alike would make a weekend of it and visit the Isle of Wight Bus Museum, ride on the classic buses in service, whilst also visiting local pubs and venues. Tim adds, Isle of Wight Camera are hoping to collaborate with the Isle of Wight Bus Museum in the future on some small pop-up events. A joint campaign with Southern Vectis is also likely, reminding the public that it is possible to travel around the island 365 days of the year, visiting many great pubs and venues, whilst seeing the sights from the top deck. On behalf of their respective organisations, the event coordinators would like to thank all the landlords, advertisers and the dozens of volunteers, but especially all the vehicle owners who brought their buses from all over the UK to take part.
Hello, this is Pauline.
And this is Susan.
Before we start the second part of the county press, here is this week's society news. The swimming group on Monday is cancelled this week due to school holidays. It will resume next week, normal time of 1:30 p.m. For more information, please call the office. Coffee and Chat is on every Wednesday at Millbrook House, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Only £1 for cake and coffee. Please come along for a chat, and members of staff will be there for any assistance with equipment and information. Our Mix and Mingle Group is held every Thursday at Millbrook House. Transport is available if required. This week the group enjoyed a visit from the Isle of Wight Glass Museum, which was very informative and the members found it very interesting.
The next stride is planned for Friday the 25th of February. More details to follow, but if you would like to join the striders on their monthly stride, please call the office. The walk is normally around 5 miles, followed by lunch in a nearby pub. Our next golf session at Westridge Golf Centre Ryde is on the 27th of February. If you would like to go along and try, please contact the office for more information. The group have several vacancies and always welcome new members. Our monthly book group is held once a month at Millbrook House. We are always looking for new members and volunteers to join, so if you would enjoy reading, please call the office. The group is free to join and the book can be either CD or memory stick form.
Now we go on to the second part of the talking news, and we begin with the letters to the editor. Vulnerable people have been forgotten. Geraldine Scott of Ryde. I would like to vent my anger at the reckless way this government is abolishing all COVID restrictions later this month, with absolutely no consideration to the millions of vulnerable people, such as my husband, who is immunosuppressed. Simple precautions such as wearing masks, home testing and isolating with symptoms have all helped us to continue our lives in relative safety. By encouraging people to behave as if this pandemic has suddenly disappeared, people with little or no immunity, even though they are fully vaccinated, will be forced to live even more sheltered lives, while everyone else gets back to normal and puts them at risk of serious illness. Vulnerable people have been completely forgotten by this government, whose leader prefers to play politics with people's lives. Vulnerable people deserve better.
Horrified by sad state of Sandown seafront. The name and address supplied, but withheld. We have been visiting the island for some 50 years. partly due to the fact that my mother and father lived in Yaverland for 35 of those years, and we always has great affection for the area and the people. Having just returned from a weekend hotel stay in Sandown with friends, I find it difficult to explain the horror of the neglect by both the building owners, developers and council who have allowed the buildings on the seafront to go beyond the state of repair to what can only be compared to a war zone. While it is appreciated that the properties require significant investment without possibly having the required profitable return, should not the council, at the very least, erect 2 metres high hoarding along the front of the affected properties and then decorate them with images of Sandown past to at least attempt to show a pleasant view, as opposed to the wasteland of damaged buildings and builders' rubbish? This would make a far more welcoming sight than the current mess and provides the impression that something is being done. Without anything being done, Sandown will sadly suffer from further neglect, with fewer visitors and further lack of spending in the local economy, leading subsequently to more business closures. Development in the area has been successful with the construction of the new Premier Inn and also the residential flats on the Parade, and as such it cannot be beyond the wit and wisdom of the local authority to assist and encourage such further investment.
A letter from Dr. Jane Boskill of Binstead. I've just paid £100 plus taxi fares for my 93-year-old mother, who lives in the Midlands, to have wax removed from her ears. Clinical commissioning groups, CCGs, effectively dictate what can and cannot be done by GPs and hospitals, and even pre-pandemic had decided that hearing loss due to wax was not a priority. The nurses have all been redeployed to do COVID jabs. A friend, also registered at the same practice with newly diagnosed asthma, had her follow-up appointment cancelled on the same morning because the nurses had been sent to Westridge. My husband and I are newly retired GPs and volunteered to give COVID jabs, unpaid, on several occasions. In times past, we did 1,000 or more flu jabs in a day. Did anyone get back to us?
Big thank you to Recycling and Waste Services from Barbara Spencer, Ryde. Since the beginning of lockdown, letters have regularly been published to thank various individuals and organisations for their kindness. But I can't recall anyone mentioning the excellent service of the Recycling and Waste Department. Throughout the past 2 years, all 3 teams have turned up without fail on their due date, whatever the weather, while coping with the same difficulties as any other workforce. We've all seen on television the rubbish piled up in the streets in some parts of the country, but we have not had that problem. I would therefore like to say a big thank you to that department for keeping the island clean and being so bright and cheerful throughout.
Letter from Nigel Lawley of Ryde. A few days ago, in the middle of the night, my wife had to call 111 for me. Within approximately 15 minutes, the ambulance arrived with 2 lovely paramedics and whisked me off to St Mary's, where A&E took care of me and then transferred me to the stroke ward. There I was looked after and assessed and finally sent home a few days later. The nurses, the doctors, tea ladies and everyone in the hospital took very good care of me. I cannot fault the NHS or St Mary's Hospital. Can we please stop knocking the NHS? They're doing their best. Long live the NHS.
Hedge Massacre by Robert Drover of Freshwater. Once again, farmers have declared war on our hedgerows. Once these countryside assets were able to survive, perhaps 1,000 or more years, and provide a home for much loved wildlife. Now longevity can only be maintained using the logic of Trigger's everlasting broom. Is it too much to hope for a return to conservation hedge laying with the proposed subsidies for farming to protect our environment?
Robert Swinton of Ventnor. Steve Barclay's announcement that the government will be taking a step back and pursuing a smaller state is, well, predictable. Having stripped the magic money tree bare, handing out billions of pounds to Tory pals, it's now time to replenish the Treasury coffers by rolling back on delivery while increasing taxes. Our newly appointed Dickensian Minister for BO, Brexit Opportunities, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is also waxing lyrical about seeing the benefits of Brexit in a decade's time. Forgive me, but I think we were promised huge benefits immediately after we left Europe, like an extra £350 million a week for our NHS. Why the public votes into power these opportunistic, self-entitled, morally bankrupt Tory toffs, who view the public purse as their own personal cash point machine, completely eludes me. Are we as a nation really that stupid?
MP of a different calibre needed, from S.J. Kent of Nettleston. As a loyal Conservative voter, I have to express my disappointment in Mr. Seeley when it comes to delivering for the island. Even his predecessor, Andrew Turner, achieved more when it comes to securing funding for the Isle of Wight. The 1 million of support for the Isle of Wight Council is an insult. The problem as I see it is twofold. Firstly, the Isle of Wight is seen as a very safe Conservative seat, and as such, there is very little political incentive to invest heavily in the island. Secondly, our current MP is seen as a political lightweight in Westminster, and little more than safe pair of hands when it comes to schmoozing his constituents, while first and foremost acting as compliant Conservative voting fodder in Parliament. For the island to move forward, I believe we need a Member of Parliament of completely different calibre.
And from N. Butcher in Freshwater. There seems to be a slight difference of opinion between the Isle of Wight Council, who have expressed disappointment at only being awarded £1 million from government, and our MP, Bob Seeley, who views the funding as a great personal achievement, saying that the island is at long last being recognised by the government. So, what are the facts? On February the 7th, the government announced that councils in England will have access to a share of £54.1 billion in funding for the coming financial year. This £54.1 billion, given the present UK population of over 68 million, equates to £790 per person. The island's award of £1 million, when divided into the island population of 141,538, represents a derisory £7.06 per person. Or viewed another way, £782.94p less for every islander than their fair share of the £54.1 billion announced by government. A total island revenue shortfall of £110.8 million. But sadly, it is worse than this. The paltry sum of £1 million pales into insignificance if you take into account the reduction in council support our MP Bob Seeley voted for in Parliament. Perhaps it is a little wonder the council CEO has announced he's off to pastures new in Cumbria. Mr. Seeley said during the last general election, "Judge me by my results. Believe you me, Mr. Seeley, I shall be."
Now we look at memories. The Elizabethan Newport and Beyond. The Life and Times of a Tudor Town by Joanne Thornton. Newport in the Tudor period was very different from the Newport of today. They were generally 3 trading spaces. The church was at the centre of St Thomas's Square, which had the corn market around it. To the north was the fish and meat shambles, or slaughterhouses. To the south were the retail shops. Each trade had its own strict rules and regulations, including what amount they could charge for their goods. Trading was also forbidden without the appropriate licence from the bailiffs. North east of the church was the Cheese Cross, which was an area designated for the trading of dairy produce. This formed the area heading down to the quay. In the centre of this area was the town hall, which contained the audit house, and nearby was a building where the Canine Court was held. The Canine Court was unique to the island and heard the pleas of knights. It had no jury and was held by the freeholders of the island to decide on the cases, which were mostly by the 17th century, dealing with debt and trespass. However, the governor of the island back in the Norman period had considerable power within the Canine Court, as the islanders were subject to his rule before that of the king, and he could decide on the justice meted out. By the 17th century, his power had been significantly reduced. St James's Square held the beast market. This had a bull ring and stake, a necessity for butchers in the Tudor period, as they were forbidden to kill a bull that had not been first baited. The area of the beast market was also used as an area for punishment. A witch was burnt at the stake here in the Elizabethan period. The father of Edward Dennis had accused her of bewitching his sister. The Newport accounts also detail payment for a stake on which to put the traitor's head.
In St James's Square now is a memorial to Queen Victoria, which was erected in 1901. The fair was a very popular event, looked forward to all year by the residents of the island and held in Newport yearly at Pentecost for 3 days. At the time of the fair, a special court was in session called the Court of Pie Powder. This dealt with all matters to do with traders and contracts made during the fair. This was held in the Pavilion Court, which was located to the west of the Church of St Thomas. This was eventually turned into an inn called the Newport Arms in the 19th century. A gloved hand was displayed outside the Pavilion Court. This signified that a fair was being held, so rules on drunkenness and disorderly behaviour were relaxed during this time. In Yarmouth on St James's Day, a gloved hand is still placed outside the town hall, keeping the tradition alive. There was a gentlemen's club in Newport, which was established in 1710 and attended by many notable gentlemen of the island. It was abolished in 1810. The club was located in the old assembly rooms, which were then known as the Sun Inn. Members met monthly on the Tuesday preceding or on the night of the full moon, no doubt to enable them to find their ways back home. In Crocker Street there was the Blue School, established in 1761 as a school to educate poor girls so that they could get jobs in service. The girls had to enter service for a year once they finished school to put their skills into use and to benefit the island community. The uniform was a blue dress, a white apron, cap and black boots. The girls were given the uniform when they started, along with a Bible and a prayer book. The statue, which stands over the entrance today, is a replica. The original is in Carisbrooke Castle Museum.
My View by Rebecca Roncorian. I had the weirdest experience a couple of weeks ago. I was in bed, watching television, and my chest started hurting, really hurting. So 999 was called, and an ambulance came. An ECG was taken, and I was feeling a bit weird. The medic, having told me the ECG was wonky, then asked something like, "What are your hopes and expectations of us tonight?" And I remember thinking that has got to be one of the stupidest questions to ask right then. I was lying there, potentially dying from a heart attack, and they were asking me what my aspirations of them were. Diagnose and treat appropriately, I suggested with a hint of sarcasm and disbelief. The medic nodded in a way that indicated that this was the right answer. He told me I had a degree of heart block in a couple of places, and I may end up being transferred to Southampton, but not to worry. I was taken to A&E. By this time the pain had subsided a lot. "Are you in pain?" "No." A few minutes later a nurse turned up with a syringe of morphine. A&E is not a quiet place to be. At one point I genuinely thought they were playing some awful modern jazz. as what sounded like trumpets in various minor notes randomly blew. I asked a nurse why they couldn't play something soothing like Mozart, as this was oral torture. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I had many tests, including a CT, for which I'm thankful. The weird thing was being treated like a thing rather than a person, lying on a trolley in A&E. A staff congregated around a computer at the bottom of my bay, completely ignoring me, talking about other patients, things done, not done, who's doing what, was strange. I felt invisible.
On the way to CT, the nursing assistant pushing me past a group of staff. "Hey, you should be off. Park her over there and I'll take her in a minute," one said. Terrified of being left in a cubicle, forgotten while the CT time slot overran, I anxiously said, "But they're waiting now." There was tutting. I was taken to the acute assessment unit for the night and hooked up to a monitor. By this time it was midnight, and up to that point I hadn't been able to contact my husband to tell him what was happening, whether I was staying, etc. I didn't really know what was going on. The medical care I received was exemplary, and for that I am truly grateful. But the humanistic side seems to be diminishing, and I think I understand why. With government cuts taking bigger and bigger chunks out of the NHS, it has had to become like a conveyor belt. While I would have appreciated a few minutes of someone reassuring and explaining things, I would not want that at the cost of someone else being denied care. The sad thing is that in many medical disciplines, GPs, mental health, etc., those humanistic interventions are the treatment.
Bob Seeley's 2021 costs revealed. Ireland MP Bob Seeley cost the taxpayer £204,000 last year on top of his salary, new figures reveal. He has the largest constituency in the UK and travel costs associated with living on an island, but his expenses are in line with the average amongst MPs. Figures from the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority show total business costs for Mr. Seeley, Stop.
Susan, do you want me to come in there? The IPSA figures.
If you want.
Do you want me to? Should I do half of it? Yeah. I'll come in there. Okay.
Sorry.
Hang on, Terry.
Yeah.
Right.
Where did I get to? Figures from the Independent Parliamentary Standards. Is that where I got to? God. Right, okay. Ready? Figures from the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority show total business costs for Mr. Seeley for the 2020 and 21 financial year was £204,131.97. This was up from £198,167.41 the year before, and on par with the average for all MPs of £203,880. By comparison, Darren Henry, MP for Broxtowe, had costs of £280,900, while Philip Hollowbone, MP for Kettering, had just £80,700. Mr. Seeley, who was elected in June 2017, spent £183,800 on office running costs, including £163,500 on staff wages and £20,200 on other office expenditures. Business costs are the costs incurred by MPs while carrying out their parliamentary duties, including staffing, office costs and travel. MPs cannot claim for personal costs such as food and drink during their normal working day.
The IPSA figures also reveal the 223 individual claims made by Mr. Seeley from the smallest one-off expense of £1.80 for car mileage. Bob Seeley's 5 largest types of office costs were 1. Payroll, £163,499, rent, £21,919, pooled staffing services, £3,050, other public transport, £2,905. Mileage for the car, £1,956.99p. He also spent £1,874.97p on a working from home allowance. Mr. Seeley said, "I keep my costs as low as possible to ensure the best use of taxpayers' money. During the pandemic, constituency casework increased dramatically, and I was receiving in excess of 1,000 emails a week relating to casework alone. Staffing costs increased to meet this demand. The Isle of Wight is the largest constituency, but we receive the same budget as all the other constituencies, so we have a lot more work. The main spend is on payroll because there is so much work to do. Payroll costs includes national insurance contributions, pension contributions and staff training. Most of my staff are islanders, which means they are part of the island community. None of my staff are related to me."
What's on? The White Strollers are back. Returning to a panto land with Dick Whittington. The timeless tale of the boy who travels to London to make his fortune. The White Strollers are delighted to be back where they belong, with a show boasting a wealth of colourful costumes, toe-tapping numbers, and a talented local cast. Are the streets of London really paved with gold? Will Dick find true love? Will King Rat's evil plan for world domination come to fruition? Will Smudge the cat ever get his dreamies? You'll have to book tickets to find out. Tickets for Saturday the 26th at Medina High School Theatre, 2:30 and 7:30 p.m. performances. Tickets are £14 and £10 for children.
And Legends of Irish Music and Song, the Furries, are appearing at Shanklin Theatre on Friday the 4th of March. If you wish to get tickets, you can phone 868 000.
The Isle of Wight Cantona Choir are performing on Saturday the 5th of March at 7:30 p.m. at All Saints Church Ryde. They will be performing the Magnificat by Rutter and Songs My Heart Has Taught Me by Chilcot. Tickets are £10, and for booking, telephone 07760 852 074.
And now, ex-Solent hovers heading east. The Isle of Wight's old hovercraft have arrived safely in Asia and have made another much shorter journey to Indonesia. In December, Ben Roos snapped a photo of Freedom 90 and Island Express on board the cargo ship Arnborg as it sailed out of the Solent. The Wagenborg-operated ship has now reached Singapore, and its precious Isle of Wight cargo has been transported by large barge to the Indonesian island of Batam, 15 miles away. Freedom 90, Island Express and the third craft Island Courier will get some cosmetic restoration and engineering work before starting their new roles. Indonesia is made up of more than 17,000 islands spread over millions of square miles of sea and across 3,500 miles from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. Around 6,000 islands are inhabited, which means plenty of opportunity for the three craft to make their mark. We would love to hear your memories of the old hovercraft in action between Ryde and Southsea.
Ryde shoe shop likely to close. A high street store in Ryde will permanently close its doors if an agreement is not reached with the building's landlord. Shoe Zone in Ryde looks likely to close its door on March the 18th, with the lease of the high street store coming to an end on March the 24th. There are currently no plans for the shop to be relocated in Ryde, leaving the two remaining island stores in Shanklin and Newport.
Road will be hell on earth for weeks. The councillor for Newport North has been pleading with Island Roads to think again over its plans to partially close Snooks Hill, which joins Fairley Road and Coppins Bridge from Monday. Speaking at January's meeting of Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council, Councillor Matt Price said, What they are proposing is going to cause absolute hell on earth for weeks. I'm pleading with the Cabinet member and Island Road to have a rethink. Around 50 metres between the Staplers Road turning and the dual carriageway link will be closed from Monday until March the 11th. For a few days it will overlap with the extended floating bridge inspection. The floating bridge will be out of service from March the 7th until April the 22nd, including over the Easter holiday, and motorists will be asked to divert via Newport. From February the 21st, while Snooks Hill is closed, diversions will be in place for Fairley Road traffic using both the link road to Medina Way and via Staplers. Southbound buses will divert via Fairley Road, Albury Lane, Cross Lane, Staplers Road, Coppens Bridge, East Street, South Street and Newport Bus Station. And northbound buses will go via Newport Bus Station. It is the latest phase of the works to improve signals and crossings at Coppens Bridge roundabout. Scott Burraborough, Island Road's powered apparatus manager, said this has been a long and complex project which represents a major upgrade to the signals and crossings in the area. We cannot get away from the fact that Coppens Bridge is the island's business road interchange, and despite our best efforts, some delays to the journey times have been inevitable.
Could shoppers get an hour of free parking? An hour of free parking in Newport could be on the cards to help bring shoppers back to the county town. Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council this week put money for the pilot scheme in its budget and is now only waiting for the sign-off from the Isle of Wight Council. As part of the Shaping Newport and NCCC proposal, the parking pilot could be launched for a year in some of the town's car parks. Chapel Street, New Street, Lugley Street and C Street car parks would be part of the scheme. The Community Council is stomping up £40,000 for the pilot, replacing the majority of the Isle of Wight Council's lost revenue with the larger authority covering the rest of the predicted £50,000 cost. Free on-street parking on roads such as the High Street has been suggested, but rejected due to the fears of added congestion and retaining the spaces for those with mobility issues. The pilot has been welcomed by Mark Horton, owner of popular Newport Cafe and sandwich bar French Franks, who said parking in the town was amongst the worst expensive in southern England. If the pilot is successful, it could lead to the permanent introduction of an hour's free parking in the eligible car parks. For the pilot to go ahead, the Isle of Wight Council will need to agree its costs in the budget next Wednesday, February the 23rd.
Big bike race route details are revealed. More hints at the route of September's highly anticipated island stage of the Tour of Britain have been revealed. The Isle of Wight will host the final stage of the cycling event on September the 11th and recently announced it will start in Ryde. Other details of the final route have yet to be announced for an event that will be televised across the world. All eyes of the world will be on the island, said Councillor Julie Jones-Evans. Speaking at a Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council meeting on Monday, member Councillor Jones-Evans, also the Isle of Wight Council's Cabinet member for Regeneration, Business Development and Tourism, said the route will come through the centre of Newport. Originally, she said the event was only going to visit the island's county town by using the dual carriageway, which she thought was not good enough. However, she said she had got organisers to change their mind. The route, Councillor Jones-Evans says, will see the cyclists start in Ryde, then go through Sandown and Newport, before possibly finishing in the West Wight. Rumours of a finish on Tennyson Down have not been confirmed. While members of the Community Council were excited about the race, further questions about the route specifics were raised, including the potential to go up to Carisbrooke Castle. Councillor Jeff Brodie, chair of the Community Council and a keen watcher of cycle races, said the worst thing in a professional cycling race was a flat stage, as the athletes would go past quickly. He said the more hills the organisers could build into the route, the better, and questioned whether the race was going to pass through the town only once, as the stages were usually around 100 miles long. Councillor Jones-Evans said she had no more details, but the final route was expected to be announced in early March.
Last of new trains arrive on the island. The fifth and final Class 484 train arrived on the island on Wednesday, just 24 hours before the last of its predecessors starts its journey to its new home on the mainland. The two-car train made its way to Sandown on the back of a lorry, temporarily holding up traffic on the fairway in Lake while it navigated a bend, and will be subject to several tests before serving customers. Meanwhile, the last 483 train, which had run on the Island Line from 1989 until 2021, will move to the London Traction Transport Group. The new trains have significantly improved the customer experience, with upgrades ranging from better interiors to plug sockets, free Wi-Fi and wheelchair spaces. The track has also been significantly enhanced, helping improve customer comfort, while a new braiding passing loop will usher in a new regular 30-minute train service aligned to the ferry timetable. At several stations, new ticket vending machines and customer information screens have been installed.
The island spending on children's mental health per child is the highest in England, data has revealed. The Isle of Wight spend is £165 per child, followed by Norfolk and Waveney. The lowest was Horton at £16 per child, followed by Trafford and Redbridge, both at £41. It means the island is spending 10 times more on its children than the lowest spend area. The news came during Children's Mental Health Week. The Isle of Wight Council and its partners were proud to support the week, which is organised by children's mental health charity Place to Be. Councillor Michael Lilly, the council's mental health champion, said, "The pandemic has put extra strain on people's mental health, especially children and young people, and this is likely to last for some time." Around 50% of those with lifetime mental health problems first experience symptoms by the age of 14, and this can now be bigger as COVID has been a huge dramatic event. We have to focus and prioritise the mental well-being of our young people. The Isle of Wight Youth Trust runs a youth mental health drop-in every Wednesday between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. in the Hub, 114 Pyle Street, Newport, where wellbeing practitioners offer information and support. No appointment necessary. If you require more information, call 529669. Kissy Puppy provides bereavement counselling for children and their families, and you can call 529511. Bernardo's Talk To service is a free confidential counselling service for under 18s, and you can get them on 865657. Space for You Safe Haven, operated by No Limits, provide emotional and practical support for 11 to 17-year-olds on Mondays in Newport and Tuesdays in Sandown.
Drink driver smashed into police vehicle. A Shanklin woman, almost twice the drink drive limit, crashed into a police van, seriously injuring her passenger. Danielle Tuffrey of Atherley Park Way was handed a 20-month driving ban, followed a two-vehicle collision at the junction of Lead Street and Fitzroy Street on the evening of January the 20th. Tuffrey, who works in the events management, naming the likes of UB40 and James Blunt as celebrities she has worked with, admitted drink driving and driving without insurance and an MOT certificate, which expired in July last year. The 32-year-old, who was driving a Mini, hit the police patrol vehicle, which sufficient force to cause her passenger, an ex-boyfriend, serious but not life-threatening injuries, said Anne Smout, prosecuting at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Tuesday. Tuffrey, travelling along Lead Street, failed to give way at the junction with Fitzroy Street and drove into the path of the police van, leaving the officers insufficient time to react. Two police officers and the male were taken to St Mary's Hospital. The officers suffered whiplash injuries and bruising. One of them also had a minor eye injury. Tuffrey told the police she had been for a meal at her mother's, which included a single glass of red wine, then drove with her ex-partner. Tuffrey blew an alcohol reading of 62 micrograms. The legal limit is 35. Both vehicles were written off. Tuffrey was convicted of being drunk in charge of a vehicle in 2019. The only thing I would take issue with is her assertion she only had one glass of wine. To breath test at that level, it must have been a very large glass, or on top of some previous drinking, said Mrs. Smout. For Tuffrey, Oscar Vincent said his client had not willfully driven without insurance and an MOT certificate, and that administration errors were made. She had wine with her meal and felt generally fine to drive, said Mr. Vincent. Through Mr. Vincent, Tuffrey apologised to the police officers. Tuffrey was also fined £461 and ordered to pay £85 costs and a £46 victim surcharge.
Royal occasion at New Church Primary as children wear a crown. It was a right royal occasion at New Church Primary School recently when children celebrated Queen Elizabeth's ascent to the throne. Children were invited to wear a crown to school to celebrate the 70th anniversary. The children have been made aware of the importance of the Platinum Jubilee during assemblies and have been learning the first verse of the national anthem as part of their daily sing. Each year group was challenged to make a crown that symbolised something special. Through a secret democratic vote, each class picked their favourite design, with the winning creations awarded a special prize. Louise Parkin, head of school, said, "The Queen's Jubilee celebration actually falls in our half-term holiday, and we thought it important to mark the day while at school. It was lovely to celebrate this occasion with the children, to see their crowning creations and their smiles on their faces."
Amy helping to showcase welding. Breaking the mould is Amy Creed, who is making a name for herself in the world of welding and fabricating. Amy, 24, grew up on the island and went to Ventnor Middle School, Medina High and the Isle of Wight College. She did A-levels in photograph and art and spent her early working life running a bar and working on the beach until she met her current employer when dropping off a wrongly delivered parcel to its rightful recipient. This chance meeting, just over 2 years, propelled Amy into a world of engineering and she never knew existed. It was not long after this that Amy was snapped up by Inspiration Fabrication, a company that designs and manufactures eco-conscious bus shelters, bench tables with solar-powered charging points, and welds for super yachts and ribs. Overseen by her employer, Amy quickly became indispensable, becoming workshop manager. She oversees all aspects of the business and, being a practical person, soon began welding. 2.5 years later, Amy is the crucial right hand of the company. She not only continues with her initial duties, she runs teams of employees both on and off site, is a fabricator and an apprentice welder, a role which Amy feels is where her passion lies. Another chance meeting was with Lincoln Electric UK in Southampton at the Rapid Welding Education Open Day in September. There, Amy was invited to try out the latest in virtual welding technology. She was impressed with the scope for its use as a welding training tool. Due to her enthusiasm for the virtual technology, Amy was invited to attend an event on the island to showcase the Lincoln Electric Vertex equipment to schools and colleges. At this event, Amy was asked to join the Lincoln Electric Women in Welding Ambassador team and wore her Lincoln Electric Mojo helmet for the first time. Amy loves stick welding and aluminium welding. She sees her future with inspiration fabrication. However, she would like to tap into her creative background to produce welding art in her spare time.
Call for tidy up of Cowes Central site. Foxes, fire hazards and shabby land have seen residents call for a developer to do something with an empty site in the centre of Cowes. The privately owned land on Market Hill is a green spot, but neighbours in nearby Castle Road have raised concerns, saying it has become increasingly untidy. The residents have now approached Cowes Town Council, CTC, asking the authority to buy the land from the developer, something it considered in 2019, and want it turned into a small park. A working party has now been set up by CTC, which has written to the landowner asking for a tidy-up. It also wants the Isle of Wight Council to investigate. Mavis Patterson, whose garden backs onto the land, says abandoned rubble and a lack of upkeep has attracted foxes and vermin, although environmental health inspectors found no evidence of it. Ms Patterson has also raised concern about the safety of the retaining walls that separate the land close to Cowes High Street. In 2013, planning permission was granted for a pair of semi-detached houses, but it has since lapsed. 10 years ago, the untidy nature of the site was also flagged by the government's planning inspectorate during a planning appeal. Cowes North Councillor Richard Quigley said Cowes residents are lucky because the town is well kept, with the sea on their doorstep. He said it meant land left in a shabby state becomes very noticeable. Councillor Quigley said it appears the landowner does not want to engage, so residents are taking the only option left and campaigning to get the site into an acceptable condition. Attempts to contact the landowner have been made, but no response has been received at the time of publication.
We need a new home to keep Carnival going. The Isle of Wight Council says it is reviewing its storage facilities for PPE, which means it has asked Ride Carnival Association to relocate. The organisation has appealed for help in its hunt for new premises for its props and trailer and space to build a summer float. It must be out by the end of March after 13 years at Westridge. The Isle of Wight Council said the authority has a need to review its storage facilities and its continued ongoing use by social care. This requires regular and unrestricted access to the compound behind the Westridge site. We discussed this with the Ride Carnival Association and regretfully have asked them to remove vehicles equipment by end of March 2022. With many more users of the facilities, we do not now consider it is safe to have additional non-council users accessing the compound. Joe Morrison, chair of Ride Carnival Association, said if anyone has any space, ideally in or around Ride, they will be willing to rent to the association. We would love to hear from you. Finding a new home would be a weight off all our minds. Can you help? Contact Joe Morrison on ridecarnival@talktalk.net.
And it's goodbye from Pauline.
And goodbye from Susan.
The In Touch programme follows. Representation in casualty. Should people explain what they look like? In Touch. Georgie Morell is a visually impaired actress and stand-up comedian. She recently appeared in an episode of BBC One's hit hospital drama Casualty, where she was cast to play a visually impaired woman and guide dog owner. Georgie wrote an article about her experience in the Metro, where she spoke about how refreshing it was to have a visually impaired person play a visually impaired character on television. We speak to her about this and hear her thoughts on other items. Love. With the world becoming increasingly more digital, we discuss access to online dating platforms when you are blind or partially sighted. And American deaf-blind writer Christina Hartman sparked a lively debate on Twitter recently about whether or not it is helpful for people to describe what they look like. Do you think it is helpful? Does it allow you to visualise the person speaking to you? Or is it just a load of unhelpful information? We delve into this. The presenter is Peter White, the producer Fern Lulham, the production coordinator Liz Poole.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Tonight, what's getting in the way of blind dates?
Because it was such an awful experience, it really has put me off trying to use further online dating services. It's too much like hard work.
We look at how dating platforms could and should do better. Also, the do's and don'ts of describing things to us, what to include and what to leave out.
Let's be real, knowing that someone's wearing a green shirt doesn't tell me much. Most people seem to reduce themselves to clothes or gender and skin colour.
But first, let's introduce this evening's guest with a bit of a fanfare. Surely one of the best-known television signature tunes for one of the longest-running medical drama series worldwide. Now, if you were watching Casualty the other night, you'll have noticed that one of the storylines had a visually impaired patient at its heart. Nothing too unusual about that. You'd probably expect to find disability featuring quite often in a hospital drama. What is still much less common is that the visually impaired woman was played by, wait for it, a visually impaired woman. Georgie Morell is a stand-up artist as well as a writer and actor, and she played the part of Julia and was pleasantly enough surprised to get the part that she went into print to congratulate the programme makers. Here she is in action.
You've been in to see us a few times recently.
Inanimate objects are not her friends.
Especially my girlfriend's shoes when left in the middle of the floor. Look, if you're having problems with balance, coordination, then we can run some tests to find out I'm blind.
Come on, Luna, let's leave these good people to it. Forward.
Well, that's Georgie Morell, and Georgie is today's guest on the programme. Isn't it a bit sad, though, Georgie, that you felt, you had to comment on it? I mean, do you think this is still happening a lot?
I wanted to give credit where credit was due because we're not really doing a lot of portrayal of disabled characters and their stories on TV and film. And to have it on something like Casualty, which has been, as I said, going forever in a day, watched by so many people, so many awards, is a really good start, but there's a long way to go.
And I mean, I think you were struck by this when you were growing up. The fact that it didn't happen, you didn't see yourself represented.
I just thought there wasn't a sort of a place for me because I didn't grow up with many role models, didn't have a visually impaired stand-up comedian to look up to, let alone an actor as well.
But it is this issue, as far as you're concerned, of visually impaired people not being played by visually impaired actors, because, of course, the argument is that there are quite a lot of them around now.
There's been an argument for a while about whether disabled actors should play disabled characters and not. And of course, we've got a bit of a history, particularly in film, of actors playing disabled characters. And it's been given the term of cripping up, which I don't think is actually all that helpful, to be honest. The difference between now and then is we now have a lot of disabled actors who have broken into the industry ready and waiting to work. I'm sat right here and, I've got a heating bill to be paid. But there is, of course, the argument that, acting is acting.
I was about to put that argument to you.
Which I'm totally for as well. You play a character, you play somebody different from yourself. However, I would say as well, if you've got a disabled actor and disabled part, the advantage you've got is that disabled actor might just be able to bring a little bit more something to that part because they've got all the experience and maybe the physical necessities required. And then the next step from that is having disabled characters in as many stories who aren't totally defined by their disability. That's sort of where we want to get to. I do have the advantage I can play visually impaired and not visually impaired. And I'd like to be able to do both, really.
But just to play devil's advocate for a minute, if we argue sighted people shouldn't play visually impaired characters, aren't they entitled to argue that visually impaired people can't or shouldn't play sighted roles?
Oh, you couldn't help yourself, could you, Peter?
No, I couldn't.
It's a worthy argument to have. Sure. At the end of the day, when you're casting who's right for the role. What we want as disabled actors is equality of opportunity. Unfortunately, there have been too many times where non-disabled actors have played disabled characters and the disabled actors weren't even considered. that's where I certainly do get a little bit huffy. Was I considered or wasn't I?
OK, well, we've given that argument a bit of a run out and I'm sure people will have comments to make. Just one more thing before we move on. How plentiful is work for you at the moment? I mean, you joked about paying the heating bills and it is no joke because you're doing a lot of different things.
You've got to be honest, to keep going in this industry. It's hugely competitive. Also, I enjoy all the different aspects I do. I write, I do stand up and I act. So to be able to do all those things is great. And the one I love the most is normally the one that's paying the most that week. My diary's pretty free this year, so
okay. Hint
the casting
taken.
departments are listening.
Look, do stay with us to talk some more, including your reactions to this next item. Now, you probably couldn't escape noticing that yesterday was Valentine's Day, but if you didn't have anybody to share it with, how much did that have to do with the difficulty of using dating websites or apps? Online dating is an issue which today's producer, Fern Lulham, has addressed before on the programme, but she decided it was time to get an update. See what I did there? So, Fern, when it comes to accessibility of dating platforms, what did you find?
Well, Peter, in terms of studies and research, surprisingly little, especially considering there is lots of anecdotal evidence from blind people that they find dating apps and sites pretty inaccessible. And finding a partner is something that, of course, very many of us regard as pretty important. A report titled The Future of Dating found that around a third of relationships which began between 2015 and 2019 started online, and by 2035, it says the UK will have reached the tipping point with more than 50% of relationships beginning online. But despite all of that, online dating accessibility just doesn't seem to be something that independent researchers or indeed blind charities have seriously looked into.
OK, let's stay with the anecdotal evidence for now then. I mean, what does that suggest? What have people been telling you?
Well, as with many areas of accessibility, it seems there's lots to be done. Blind users complain that apps in particular can be incompatible with screen readers and that many of the command buttons are not labelled, which of course prevents us from being able to navigate around the platform.
So what's the net result of that as far as someone who's blind and looking for love, or at least someone to have a nice time with?
Yeah, well, that is, of course, the bottom line. So I spoke to Michelle Barnes-Moss, who's blind, and here's what she told me about her experience.
To be honest, I was very disappointed. I thought the accessibility would be quite amazing, but sadly it's not. eHarmony I found was the worst. There was so many questions to do on the form. It felt like a 6,000 word essay, but generally on the whole I found that they weren't very good at all for accessibility. My e-reader and that misses parts. It doesn't read it all properly.
And did a lack of accessibility just lead you to give up on certain sites?
To be honest, I've given up completely. Yes, definitely. This is going to sound really awful, but it's too much like hard work. Because it was such an awful experience, I've decided it's really not for me. I wouldn't like to do online dating.
Is that in accessibility terms, or is that just in sort of talking to people terms?
Oh, no, sorry, I can talk behind legs off a donkey. No, accessibility terms. The lack of accessibility really is quite off-putting.
And what improvements do you think could be made to online dating sites or apps to make them more accessible to blind and visually impaired people?
With the photographs, if you could get a clear description, that would be helpful. I can't differentiate between dark colours, especially if someone's got dark hair. They kind of tend to merge into the background. So if there could be something to say, right, the background is, prime example, purple, it would really help.
How does that make you feel when you just can't use an app like that?
Incredibly frustrating, almost, I'd say, stupid as well, and kind of not worthy, because it's supposed to be a simple thing that you do and you're unable to do it.
Well, we put Michelle's concerns to eHarmony. They told us in a statement, "We're committed to making our site an equal experience for all members and have a dedicated accessibility statement. For our blind and partially sighted members, we enable screen reader support that renders text and image content as speech or braille output. This ensures there's no interruption to the service. So Fern, they obviously feel that they've done everything they can. Any luck contacting anyone else in the industry?
Peter, I have contacted 10 companies to ask for their comments on accessibility. 6 were leading mainstream ones, whilst the other 4 were specialist platforms for visually impaired or other disabled people. Now, interestingly, I got just one response, which was from a specialist provider, and they said, and I quote, "We are currently not looking for such opportunities, but if that changes in the future, we will let you know." How kind.
Yeah, well, perhaps that tells its own story, doesn't it? So did you find any cause for optimism at all?
Surprisingly, Peter, I did. Of the very limited advice that I managed to find for blind online daters, an e-book produced by the Henshaws charity does review the accessibility of leading mainstream and specialist sites and apps. It highlights those that are most accessible to blind users, for example, because of compatibility with screen readers and labelled buttons.
OK, so how would you sum up your findings?
Perhaps the most surprising thing that I found is what a low profile the accessibility of online dating has. So whilst there's plenty of advice on things like safety on a date, accessibility seems to have flown largely under the radar. I would urge people who want a relationship to give online dating a try though, and importantly, if you find that accessibility is a problem, complain, because these issues really do need to be highlighted. Equally, I'd urge the online dating providers to reach out. I think there are plenty of us that are very willing to spend our money with online dating companies, so this is something we need to work together on. And to end on a positive, Peter, I'm living proof that online dating can work for blind people because that's how I met my partner, and I'd highly recommend it. Although whether he'd say the same is a completely different matter, which sadly I just don't think we've got time to discuss, Peter.
Oh, I don't know. I think we might be able to fit it in. Actor Georgie Morell is still with us. Georgie, do you now or have you ever, as I think it was the American intelligence agency, the way they put the question, do you ever use dating websites?
I don't know. I am in a long-term relationship. So if I was, he might have a few questions when he hears this.
Well, all right. Did you before?
Do you know what? Before I was with my partner, I was single for a good few years. I sort of wanted to be single, but I sort of did once as an experiment. Just out of curiosity, because all the mates were doing it. You hear all the stories that are coming back, successful ones, quite frankly, frightening ones, and all sorts in between. There was a guy who got in touch who worked in finance, and he was so rude, it just put me off the whole thing. Yeah. He did the thing of saw I was an actor and comedian, and me was like, "Oh, tell us a joke." I was like, "Oh, do my accounts, it's my job, dude." And I never went back.
I mean, you have had a very fluctuating issue really with your sight, and I just wondered how much was dating a problem as your visual situation varied so much.
When I was in my early 20s, I admit I probably would have hidden it, my disability and my vision impairment, for a certain amount of time until you can't. But now if I was single and dating, I'd be loud and proud about it because it's a huge part of my life and got no reason to hide it or be ashamed. Using the apps and stuff, I struggle a bit with Twitter, to be honest. So, God, it's supposed to be fun dating. It's supposed to be fun.
A little variation from this, because it's not often these days that an issue comes up on In Touch, which we've never dealt with before. But I can honestly say that I don't remember this particular point made by Christina Hartman, who's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her Twitter post is read here by a BBC colleague.
As a deaf-blind person, I feel torn about the trend of people describing their physical appearance during meetings for the benefit of those who are blind or who have low vision. I appreciate the effort to make things more accessible and inclusive, truly, deeply, but the experience is awkward and less than illuminating for me, an actual blind person. Let's be real, knowing that someone's wearing a green shirt doesn't tell me much. Most people seem to reduce themselves to clothes or gender and skin colour. Now, there are also sensitive issues such as race and ethnicity that might arise. I'm a Latino, so I'm sympathetic to that. The experience also makes me, and I suspect others, hyper-aware of my difference. I can also feel the cogs in people's minds as they talk to me, thinking about how I don't see them. But here's the thing, I'm now a more tactile, olfactory, auditory, visually impaired person. I can tell a lot about you by how you move your hands and your body. Now, this is a legitimate way of perceiving people, and I'm uneasy with the assumption that visual details are better. Also, I've never been asked if I want this, even if I'm the only blind person in the room. That doesn't smell right to me. This is only opinion, and I want to open this topic up to polite and respectful discussion. How can we address these issues?
Well, by discussing them on In Touch, I guess, Christina. Christina was very happy for us to do that. So what do we make of that view? Georgie, you do have now some useful sight again. What's your take on this?
I did do a workshop a little while ago, and that was something that was used because we had a few visually impaired people in. And it didn't really bother us, but we had a bit of fun with it, I think. And I found something interesting in how people perceive themselves as to what you sort of take from them. I think that can tell you a lot about a person.
What about you, Fern? I'm just wondering if it's something that would be of value to you at all.
I think it's a really difficult one. So I was thinking about this. I wonder if there's anything that I've experienced. And I know when sort of people introduce themselves and they say who they are, I used to find that very awkward. And like Christina was describing, oh, it's making me feel so disabled. But now sometimes when people come up to me as I'm losing more and more of my sight, I just think, I wish they'd tell me who they are, because I don't know and I'm trying to feverishly figure it out. But I think the real answer is just ask us. Don't assume. Just ask.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to raise here, and listeners might give us some ideas about how they feel about these things, is other things that you don't necessarily want described. Because some people do think that you really need everything described to you. My pet hate is going to people's houses and you've only gone for dinner, but they think as a blind person you'll need a guided tour, and you have to go all through every room, and this is our airing cupboard. I don't think I'm going to need the airing cupboard. I've only come for the evening. That is one thing I must say.
But again, some people would love the tour, so that's what I'm saying. You need to ask people what they're in the market for. Peter, not so much.
No.
Well, that's the courses, isn't it, really?
I think there's one most important route when you go to somebody's house, and that's where's the bathroom, basically. Once I know that, I'm quite happy.
Priorities.
Yeah, priorities. Well, we've opened it up. Let's see what people think about that. Georgie, just one final thing, bringing you back to your own career. As if all your other activities weren't enough, I gather you're co-writing a film script?
I'm writing on 2 projects. One is a film script with Silver Salt, and that's coming along quite nicely. The same company have optioned a pilot I wrote, which is based on my first show, A Poke in the Eye.
So we'll soon be able to say writer, actor, comedian, and also film script writer.
Oh, I hope so. I like that, script writer. That sounds cool.
Well, that's it for today. If you have views on dating and dating platforms, what people should bother to describe to you and what you'd rather they left out, or who has the right to act which parts, you can email In Touch at bbc.co.uk. You can leave a voice message on 0161 836 1338, or you can go to our website for more information, bbc.co.uk/in touch. And by the way, we're also planning a programme on tracing your ancestry. Maybe because you want to discover the origins of your visual impairment, or maybe just because you want to know more about your family history. How accessible are those websites? Many thanks to Georgie Morell for being our guest today. Thanks, Georgie. And from me, Peter Wight, producer and part-time dating correspondent Fern Lulham, and studio managers Tom Parnell and Sue Stone Street. Goodbye.